Hello everybody, I am WittlerFam and welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to be going over one of my favorite Pokemon trading card game formats in quite some time. And it is the 2017 Pokemon TCG format. Many people know it as the NAIC 2017 format or the Primal Clash through Guardians Rising format. I just like to nickname it the Clash of the Guardians format. I know it's been quite some time since I have done a Pokemon video. I have these long gaps in my channel. It's always a myriad number of reasons, but thank you so much for stopping by today and checking out the video. And if you like what you see today, click the like button. And if you like the rest of the channel or you want to see more videos in the future, click the subscribe button. Without further ado, we'll get started and we'll take a look at we're here on limitlesstcg.com, which goes over all of the Pokemon trading card game formats. And you can actually go and look at tournaments and decks and go in the filter and time travel back quite a ways, actually. You can edit this. You can look at formats from the Legacy era all the way back to 2011. And although you won't get deck lists for everybody, it gets way more detailed as you go through the modern era, as more and more players upload their deck lists up here in the Limitless TCG website. So the first thing I want to do before I go over in this video, because mostly what this video is for, is taking a look at some of my favorite decks from the format. Some popular ones, some very high-performing ones, whether it was at NAIC, the North America International Championship of that year, or whether it was events like regionals. What we're going over are some of the decks of my favorites, some of the top performing ones, some of the more popular ones. But before I go into that, I want to take a look at the percentage of the meta share that some of these decks have. And you'll note that if you are familiar with this format at all, you're going to see some pretty obvious ones here. The number one here is Drampa Gardevoir. And a note, I've split the decks into variants. So if you don't split them into variants, you get this huge amount of decks skewed towards the Gardevoir decks, as well as the Decidueye Gx decks. And then you go on down and see some of the EXs that performed really well at the time, as well as a few Megas. But I'm splitting the decks into variants because I do think that that sort of variance is important to note when talking about some of these decks. And you'll also note that the percentage share here, the best performing decks from the season of the 2017 era, are all performing decks that came out of Guardians Rising, mostly towards the top. Drampa Gardevoir is a new archetype when Guardians Rising hit. Decidueye Vileplume was being experimented as Sun and Moon entered, but started to find its footing, especially when you add in Ninetales as well, which was a good variant. I think both had a very good share, but Decidueye Vileplume was around just one set longer, and then of course Vileplume has been around since Ancient Origins, which was, let's see, that's going back into 2015. So these are sets from 2015 up to 2017. But then you take a look at some of the slots down here. You see Yveltal Gardevoir, and Gardevoir isn't just represented by the Gardevoir that was the Trashalanche that released at the time, but also the Gardevoir that was known for Garbotoxin. And I'll just real quick show you to give you a distinction between the two. This is the Gardevoir with Garbotoxin that if you had an item on it, you locked abilities. So very popular at the time. And when you combine those two, you have a very oppressive deck, especially in decks of the likes like Espeon Gardevoir and Drampa Gardevoir, both very good at doing that. So prior to these releases, you had very popular decks such as Mega Rayquaza, as well as Darkrai EX with its Dark Pulse, and it was also known as Turbo Darkrai because you were trying to speed through, get as much energy as possible into play so that you could just wreck your opponent. Same concept with Mega Rayquaza, in a manner of speaking. But also down here in the 10th slot is Mega Mewtwo Gardevoir. Now, to anyone that discusses the NAIC 2017 format, I would say almost nobody talks about some of these decks that I'm looking at because I see that they're top performing, so where did they go? What happened? And the real simple answer is Tapu Lele GX and Gardevoir with Trashalanche both came out. And Tapu Lele made it so much easier for these setup decks to happen, whether it was turn 1, Tapu Lele, Wonder Tag for Bridget to get a bunch of setup Pokemon set up, or whether it was that, or you were playing the Gardevoir, which punished some of these turbo decks, like Mega Rayquaza and Darkrai, that relied on a heavy amount of items to just turbo through their deck. You would be punished for playing a bunch of items. So the short answer is that nobody at the time was willing to change how to build those style of decks and just instead adapt to other decks and play the newer things at the time. But I'm willing to bet that with some experimentation in this modern day, because some people really love going back to the 2017 format. I can't begin to describe how much fun it is. Still to this day, I still play it. And I think exploring some of these archetypes with some minor tweaks here and there might actually yield some pretty interesting results. I would say, like, if you're looking at popular decks, Espeon Gardevoir and Drampa Gardevoir are going to be popular, as well as anybody that wants to play Decidueye decks in general. Those are going to be popular. But I'm willing to bet that some way of adjusting some of these Mega Evolution decks might be good. I think the biggest crux, though, behind them is that a GX has a GX attack and is easier to get into play than a Mega Evolution. A Mega Evolution, you have to evolve, and a Mega Evolution, you need a Spirit Link, and some Megas don't even have a Spirit Link. So with that out of the way, I just want to take a look at that and show that there were very good top-performing decks in this meta share, as well as there's a few fun ones in here, down here. I mean, the Gyarados from Ancient Origins that played and won a special event in Europe, as well as the Metagross GX deck that was the runner-up at the Madison Regionals that was piloted by Chris Schmansky. Really great decks. It's just one cool thing about this format is lots of variety. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in to the first deck that I think, again, if you're familiar at all with the year, with the era, you're going to be familiar with Tord Reklev's champion deck of the NAIC. I'm going to flub that so many times this video. The NAIC 2017 format tournament that came, and Drampa came, Drampa saw, Drampa conquered, with much thanks to the Tapu Lele GX, maxed out at 4 copies in the deck, just adding so much consistency to searching out supporters when you needed them. Also playing that Trashalanche Gardevoir with 1 copy of the Garbotoxin Gardevoir. Keep in mind, a lot of these decks that I'm showing off are not just favorites of mine, but also decks that I have built in 2017 Gauntlet that I might go over sometime. It would be a little redundant to look at deck lists over and over again, except the difference is my deck lists are not going to be exact, but I will take a lot of inspiration from some of these lists. Like, for example, my list does not run 4 Tapu Lele GX. I think running 3 is just fine enough, as well as like squeezing in a different Pokemon that you could potentially play with Rainbow Energy is a lot of fun. I've been looking at a few other basic EX Pokemon to possibly throw in just to like spice it up and make it a little different. And I also like having Oricorio, just in case somebody wants to bring a Vespiquen deck, or like just late game Oricorio can do really good work just by spreading damage counters for each Pokemon that's in your opponent's discard pile. So very, very good card to play in there as well. Typical supporter lineup, you're going to see lots of decks with 3 to 4 Sycamore, 3 to 4 N, 2 Lysander, and either Bridget, Teammates, or some other form of single copies of supporters there. It's pretty awesome, and I really, really like and respect the high energy count here. You're never missing a beat, in my opinion, when you're playing this deck, because you're slapping energy down a lot. Also, 4 Choice Band, crazy good. You are always getting value and damage advantage over your opponents that also play GXs and EXs. This is the runner-up in NAIC 2017. This is John Kettler's second place list, the Decidueye Vileplume list, that also played a single copy of Lugia EX. I do not have this list built, but I'm very interested in trying this out again sometime, since Item lock can be very infuriating to play against, but very satisfying to set up when you are playing it yourself. And note that it plays one copy of Olympia, which is a really cool option to switch since you can't play items and your energy is pretty precious when you do have item lockdown and you can't play the switches, you can't play escape ropes. So Olympia is a good option. I'd almost consider adding a second copy of Olympia if I play this, because having switch options, just in case someone were to get your Vileplume trapped and you don't happen to have a Floatstone up and running, which is why it's very important when you're playing this deck. You want to establish an item lock when you have everything you think you need set up. That being said, of course, your opponent can play Hex Maniac, and all of a sudden, for one turn, they have items, and they can Field Blower your Floatstone away and probably cripple you later if you don't have a way to get out of the active spot. So those Floatstone, very, very precious. Very cool deck. Probably not my favorite way to play Decidueye GX. I definitely have another preferred way of playing, and that is in the Decidueye Alolan Ninetales list. It's a very solid deck. The list we're looking at here is actually Stefan Ivanov's from NAIC 2017. This was his 10th place list, and it was a very good deck list that I really enjoy because of the max potions. I also enjoy because of the Tapu Koko, just early game spreading potential, as well as combining that spread potential with the Espeon EX, which can miraculous shine, de-evolve GXs or de-evolve big Pokemon that are evolved, and then all of a sudden, when you de-evolve them, if they have more damage counters than their max HP is, all of a sudden they get knocked out. So really, really fun, really skillful, rewarding deck to play. My list, I actually play another copy of Alolan Ninetales GX. I do prefer that. I think it's what I'm missing is the Mewtwo. And looking at the Mewtwo, it does make sense. You do want to have some sort of counter to that Espeon GX, which, wouldn't you know it, the next deck. Again, I would say one of the most popular decks that performed, not only just at NAIC, but throughout the 2017 format. This was a very good deck. As soon as Espeon GX released in Sun and Moon, this was a surefire deck to look out for. This was very, very good. Along with having that Ditto Metamorphosis gene in there, where you could just use the attacks if your opponent's active for just one energy. That's pretty solid. I think that was pretty good for the mirror match as far as I'm concerned. I'm also trying to think of other situations where that would be really good. You would be able to do quite a bit with that, actually. The Flareon, just making your stage 1s all fire type as well. Very good in case you are anticipating running against a lot of Decidueye GX at the time. This list here was piloted by Xander Pero as well as Caleb Gettimer, same 60. Caleb ran it at 16th place, and Xander played it to 25th place. Very, very solid deck. Again, sporting that Hex Maniac, sporting that Oricorio in case you run up against an Vespiquen. Garbotoxin's very, very good. Parallel City, you could use that in multiple ways, honestly. You could use it to shrink your opponent's bench, really punish any deck that loves Skyfield. I suppose you could also use it against yourself. The blue side facing you, you could all of a sudden shrink your bench so that if you think you have some sort of liability where Espeon GX has 180 damage on it, you could just Parallel City it away and save yourself from your opponent taking an extra 2 prizes on you. Very, very good. And I can't understate how solid Divide GX is. Whether you play it early game or late game, this is such a cool attack to spread damage. You can do some really funky plays with that. As well as having access to Tapu Lele GX's, not just Energy Drive, but also Tapu Cure GX is a pretty solid way to heal. I think healing is actually a very strong play with this deck, whether you're using Parallel City or Tapu Lele GX. Moving right along to Ryan Sablehouse's NAIC 2017 Volcanion EX list. This is another one of my favorites. I pick up the deck and it's just a lot of fun to play. It's really solid, really I have a good time when I play this deck. Note that the Volcanion is dual type, so it is fire, but it's also water, and it's weak to water. So in mirror matches, you could theoretically hit a Volcanion EX for weakness because you're water type, but you also have to look out for that big bad Alolan Ninetales that's out there. Because just Alolan Ninetales can slap a DCE down, slap a Choice Band on it, and as long as they put one Feather Arrow onto that Volcanion, all of a sudden Volcanion EX is sitting with 160 HP, and they can knock you out. So I think that's where the Fighting Fury Belts are very, very important for the list. I don't necessarily think you need Choice Bands in the list, but if you wanted to sport one, wouldn't hurt, just to give you a little extra damage. Not that you should need it. After all, Steam Up is such a cool ability. Once during your turn, discard a fire energy from your hand, and then all your basic fire Pokemon deal an extra 30 damage. And wouldn't you know it, look at all these. These are basic fire Pokemon. So the basic premise of this deck is pretty straightforward. You are trying to get Volcanion single prizers and Volcanion EXs, as well as the occasional Turtonator GX that also came out when Guardians Rising released. You're just trying to stick them in the active and tank with them and punch hard with them. So very, very cool list. I enjoyed a lot. It's a lot of fun. Having that Starmie in here is pretty sweet. With Space Beacon, you can just constantly get your fire energy back over and over and over. Very, very cool. Another one of my favorite lists, and I have a lot of favorites, but I think if I were to go back in time and go and play more tournaments for this, I would have played more Lapras GX. Now, I understand it is weak to grass, but I think Lapras on its own, it creates a lot of pressure, has a built-in consistency attack with its 1 energy attack collect, just draw 3 cards. And I also think that because of cards like Manaphy EX existing to give you that free retreat, because of Glaceon EX in there with its Crystal Ray to give you an edge against evolved Pokemon, which the format was starting to go more and more towards, I do think this is a solid deck. And you would play around with this quite a bit because the Max Elixirs can get energy out quick. The energy switches could make you make some fantastic plays where all of a sudden a water energy moves from one Pokemon to another and you Aqua Patch and you get something set back up super quick. Very, very cool. And also sometimes you had some coin flip luck with Articuno from Roaring Skies because of its Delta Plus trait. You could cheese out an extra prize if you knock out something with its Tri-Edge attack. Now, of course, it only does 20 base damage, but you can bump that up with Choice Band and Professor Kukui. And yeah, you could probably sneak an extra prize out of nowhere. So a little bit of luck factor there, but also just a lot of fun to play. Very much enjoy Turbo Lapras GX. There is another variant that actually did win a regionals right before Guardians Rising came out, and that would have been the first place quad Lapras list. That is the one that was very much focused on just being a control deck and wearing your opponent down by playing Crushing Hammers, playing Team Flare Grunt, and just wearing them down. I don't necessarily like control decks all the time, but I suppose if you wanted to take a note from that, you could also turn this into a control variant as well. Moving along to another turbo deck. Before Lapras, there was a cool deck that just really reigned supreme for quite a while, and that was Darkrai EX with its Dark Pulse attack, also nicknamed the Turbo Dark deck. Now, this list we have here, this is, let's see, Vlastimil Booker. I think I'm pronouncing this right. This is a list that was at a Liverpool Regionals, actually. It was 25th place, and this was the closest thing I could find that was a list that was also in Guardians Rising. Super solid deck list, and the reason I like it, it's just straight consistency. It goes with a lot of 4-ofs. It goes with a lot of energy. It just goes for one simple, straightforward plan. You're attacking with Yveltal, you're attacking with Darkrai EX, sometimes you're attacking with Tapu Lele, and when Garbotoxin is live, you are shutting off your opponent's abilities and making it harder for them. Also, combining that Garbotoxin with EXP share, so now all of a sudden Garbotoxin is live, but also you are actively keeping Dark Energy on the board as you continue to play the game and play another Darkrai EX. That's super cool. I like that concept a lot. And Alter the Moon to give you some mobility there. And real quick, before I forget, This list here, this Lapras list, this is Israel Sosa's list that he played at the Seattle Regionals, 5th place. Very solid. This should have been the first regionals where Guardians Rising was legal. So that's, want to give credit where credit is due. Now here's a wild and cool deck. And although I don't have an exact build of this one, I think that this is a very good deck list to represent at the time. This is another top 8 NAIC deck. Andrew Mahone of Tricky Gym fame and his 7th place Zoroark Drampa list. This list is wild. It's nuts. It works so well because Zoroark is actually a really good attacker. It punishes your opponent for playing too many Pokemon on the bench, as well as just having an awesome Pokemon break for just 1 Dark Energy, slapping with Foul Play. Very, very good attack. Just imagine Foul Play copying a Lapras Gx that has to power up with 3 energy, and you're like, nah, I'll just do it with 1 energy. And if you slap a Choice Band on it, you are knocking out that Lapras. Super solid. Also, the Drampa GX with combination of Rainbow Energy as well as a couple of the Team Magma's secret base, that Drampa GX can use Berserk for big damage because it only does 80 as a base damage, but it does 70 more if any of your benched Pokemon have damage counters. So you got that synergy with Rainbow Energy, you have that synergy with Team Magma's secret base. Very, very cool deck there. Playing a variety of supporters as well. You have Bridget, you have Teammates, you have Hex Maniac to shut off abilities while you're playing in case you need to turn the tempo towards you and just give you a turn with no abilities in play on your opponent's side. I highly recommend giving this deck a try. And in case I haven't stated it already, this is a inexpensive format to build. Most of the deck lists in this format sit around $50 to $60. So if you don't have any of these cards and you just want to try it out with your friends, very inexpensive to just build and play and have a lot of fun. And this list is one of those lists where if you want something crazy and fun to play because you've got lots of avenues to victory, this is the one to play. And quick note, Turtonator GX, wild that it's in here, but because it only takes a double colorless to use Shell Trap, it works out really well. And sometimes you can just punish a Decidueye GX for being in play. Now we have everybody's least favorite deck, or I guess some people would say it's their most favorite deck, especially if you pilot it to a top finish. This list is from Alex Reklev. He played to an 8th place finish at NAIC 2017 with Greninja Break, with Talonflame with Gale Wings from the Steam Siege set. A stage 2 that you don't even need to evolve to get into play, because if you just open with this in your hand and you can set up for this card, you can set this card up as on your first turn as your face down active Pokemon. So yes, you're only going to get use out of 1 Talonflame, but if you up the consistency and just put 4 of them in your deck, the chances of opening with this Talonflame are very, very good. Note that he started with 4. He played 4 Talonflame and 3 Froakie. So yes, you have a much higher chance of opening with the Talonflame as opposed to the Froakie. Plus 1 Talonflame break. You can't use the attack on the break, but you can change your typing to fire. And again, that's pretty good versus Pokemon like Decidueye GX or even metal Pokemon like Metagross GX. But yeah, the Greninja bread and butter is pretty much, once Greninja is set up, you Shadow Stitching turn after turn unless you need to take a break from ability locking to do Moonlight Slash to take a knockout. Otherwise, the best plan is to just keep Shadow Stitching, locking your opponent. And before you know it, you're going to have Greninja Break after Greninja Break in play, and you're going to be doing giant Water Shuriken, and after that, it's just sky's the limit with this deck. Now note that spread decks do actually have a nice little advantage over this deck, but I would say the minute that Greninja is set up, it's just very, very hard to overcome, especially because everything in this deck is a single prize deck. Now, the only downside I would call this deck, really, is honestly, it's a very linear deck. You only have one real straightforward plan. You are going with Talonflame to start, or perhaps Froakie. Then you are going into the Frogadiers, and you are water duplicating, and you are hoping you don't prize your water duplicates. Then you are going into the Greninjas, and then you are evolving into the Breaks, and then you just lather, rinse, repeat with Giant Water Shuriken, Shadow Stitching. It's one of those decks where if you think you're going to have fun playing this style deck, then by all means try it out and play it. But if you want decks that give you more plans of action and less linear gameplay, maybe steer clear of this one. Also, none of your friends are going to like you if you play this deck. Moving right along to another deck that some friends are split upon, I would say. Some love it, some hate it, but I say, hey, Mega Evolutions, Mega Pokemon, they were a thing of the past, so let's relive the glory days by evolving into Mega Rayquaza turn 1 and potentially hitting for huge damage turn 1 if you go second, because why not? I mean, it's a Mega deck. You want to go fast. You want to do the thing. You want to play the cards. This list is by Reno Bernardo. He played to a 42nd place finish at NAIC 2017. And why that might not be a huge top 8 finish, it's still very respectable because this, keep in mind, this was a tournament where 1,000+ players played in the Masters division. So to break into even the top 100 with this deck is something to remember. And also note that this was a top performing deck for the majority of the rest of the season because it was a fast Mega Evolution where all you needed was a big board and a sky field and not the fear of someone playing Field Blower to get rid of your stadium. Or even worse, Parallel City. Yes, this deck does fold to Parallel City very, very easily. You do have a lot of contingency plans by playing this deck, however. One thing I note that's missing from this particular deck list, I would very much like to see Dragonite EX because it's a very, very good way of getting Pokemon back. But you also have Rescue Stretcher. You can shuffle them back into deck. And they're playing a sweet Mallow and Professor Kukui in here to not only just get them extra draw, but also, like, you know, consistently put the top 2 cards of whatever they need on the top of their deck. So, like, late game, this mid to late game, you start to see, like, issues with draw. So unless you're playing down your hand size and you're drawing with Oranguru, you're starting to, like, you'll start to come up short on some of your draws. But overall, this is just one of those aggressive decks. You want to win fast, you want to win early, you want to take the knockouts first. If you do that, you can barrel through the competition with this deck. Also, I like seeing the Oricorio here. That makes sense, because you're playing an Oricorio, gets you basic energies, and it just acts as another damage modifier. So instead of playing like an Energy Search or Professor's Letter, play a Pokemon, boost your damage, and get you an energy. So great. And of course, Mega Turbo. Some of the Mega decks I have here listed, Mega Turbo is just so awesome. And it works whether they're in the active or the bench. You get to attach a basic energy from your discard pile to one of your Mega Evolution Pokemon. Yes, active or benched. Gotta love it. Mega Rayquaza is awesome. I can hear the drums of war in my head because when I played Tapu Bulu and Vikavolt, I don't think I ever won a single game. Maybe one in playing tournaments. But, you know, if you look at the tournament results and they don't lie, some people performed very admirably with this Pokemon deck. John Roberts II performed a 26th place at the NAIC 2017 event. And some people are going to just argue with you until they're red in the face and say this is a meme. But regardless of how you feel about it, the deck did have results. It could be luck, it could be good matchups, it could be any number of reasons. So regardless, Vikavolt Tapu Bulu is just a stage 2 deck with big basic attackers where the Vikavolt gets the energy out of the deck, attaches them to the Bulu, and you just start swinging. The best thing about Bulu is it's a grass Pokemon with no weakness. Kind of like Tapu Lele and Tapu Koko GX at the time. Very, very solid consistency if you play lots of Skyla, like John did, as well as Rare Candy and Heavy Ball. I'd say MVP of the deck is going to be Heavy Ball, because instead of just discarding cards from your hand to play Ultra Ball, Heavy Ball gets you any Pokemon with 3 retreat cost, and That works out great. That gets you Charjabug, Vikavolt, and Tapu Bulu. That's half your Pokemon in your deck. So if you're going to play this list, I would definitely consider 2 or even 3 Heavy Ball if you're going to play this. But don't be sad if you brick and lose with Vikavolt Bulu like I did so many times. Rip me at Memphis Regionals 2017. It was a sad time. And finally, we get to the last deck I'm going to go over on this video. I know I'm getting a little long-winded, and we're going to wrap it up with one more Mega Evolution deck that definitely saw more play than you would like to believe. This is, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, so I'll try to say it as best I can. Ciaran Farah's NAIC 48th place list for Mega Gardevoir. And it hyper-focuses in on a Skyfield strategy where you get a bunch of Shaman down and Hoopa EX and Dragonite EX down. And all you're trying to do is get those Pokemon out there to boost your damage so that Mega Gardevoir EX can go from 110 damage to 190 if you discarded your whole bench. Now, I say don't discard your whole bench. I say play things like Professor Kukui to boost your damage, have the VS Seekers ready, have those Mega Turbos, charge up a Mega Gardevoir super fast. And yes, this is a super aggressive deck. Again, making use of the Oricorio, getting you energy. Skyfield expanding your bench. Hoopa's fetching things out of your deck. Shaman drawing you cards like it always does. And Dragonite EX getting you Pokemon out of your discard pile to put back onto your bench to reuse that Despair Ray attack. Note that Mega Gardevoir is also 2 types, Fairy and Psychic. And a popular deck at the time, of course, was Espeon GX. So Mega Gardevoir hits for Psychic, but is weak to Metal and resistant to Dark. So not taking that big damage from Espeon back. So ultimately a very good deck to play if you anticipate your meta call is going to be against a lot of those kinds of decks. Garbodor decks, Espeon decks. You just kind of have to discipline when you play items with this deck. And also, just notice this, there's quite a few supporters. 2 copies of Sycamore and End, but then a lot of single copies of supporters. So probably anticipating all of the Trashalanche item-heavy hate in that particular tournament. So that is going to do it for the video today. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that you would like to see more Pokemon TCG content from the retro modern era that is 2017. Again, hit the like button if you like what you see, and let me know what you guys and gals think out there. What do you say? Do you like this format? Do you want to see content of this format? And are there decks that I didn't cover that you think that were really big ones that represented the metagame or were underrepresented that could be really, really good in today's modern day 2017 tournaments? Because let's face it, it's popular enough that people still want to play this format. So let me know what you all think, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye!